The .NET Core podcast is supported by our listeners who have become patrons. To see a full list of the patrons, or to join them, head over to .NETCore.show/patrons. Hello everyone and welcome to the .NET Core podcast, an award-winning podcast where we reach into the core of the .NET technology stack and, with the help of the .NET community, present you with the information that you need in order to grok the many moving parts of one of the biggest cross-platform multi-application frameworks on the planet. I am your host, Jamie Gaprokman-Taylor. In this episode, I talked with Poornima Nayar about Umbraco Hardcore and Blazor. We've discussed Umbraco and Blazor on the podcast before, but always as separate topics. Poornima is an expert in both Blazor and Umbraco Hardcore, Heartcore being Umbraco's headless CMS software as a service. We discussed both the headless version of Umbraco, why you might consider using it, and we also touched on GraphQL, which is one of the things that Umbraco Hardcore supports thanks to it using modern .NET. That's .NET 5 and beyond. So let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and let the show begin. So thank you very much, Poornima, for being on the show. I really appreciate taking your time out of your day. You're a busy person. We're all busy people. So taking some time out to actually talk to me is, I really appreciate it. I'm going to try and not waffle my way through this because it's not good for the listener and for you. For me just to be, yammering on and taking loads of time out. But thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Jamie, for having me on your show. It's always fun to talk tech because when you talk tech, you learn tech as well. And I like talking about Umbraco, Hardcore, and Blazor as well, which is the topic for our show today. So yes, happy to be here, happy to be talking.
Excellent. Okay, you've let the cat out of the bag. We're going to be talking Umbraco Hardcore. We're going to be talking a little bit about Blazor, all of those lovely, wonderful things. But I guess if you wouldn't mind, before we start, would you mind introducing yourself to the listeners so they know a little bit more about you, the kind of work you do, that kind of stuff? Is that okay?
Yes, of course. So my name is Poornima Nayar. I'm a freelance .NET developer and I'm based in Berkshire, UK. I'm a Microsoft MVP for developer technologies, and I've been an Umbraco MVP for the last 3 years. So I started using Umbraco when it was at its version 4.7, I think. And ever since then, Umbraco has remained with me for the past 11, 12 years. So it's a community that I always go back to. Umbraco has always remained with me. And of late, I've been doing some experiments with Umbraco Hardcore as well, just because it's so flexible. I can do different things with it, and I will talk about that more today, later on during the show. And non-work me, I'm a mother as well. I have a 7-year-old girl who I spend a lot of time with, and I read a lot, mainly fiction. I'm currently reading a book called The Princess Remembers, which is a biopic about Princess Gayatri Devi of India. And I'm also a student of Carnatic music vocals. I've been learning that for past 3-4 years now. So hopefully you'll get to hear me perform as well at some point.
Brilliant. It's always really important to have that the thing or things outside of the workspace that we're into, right? I feel like it is really rather easy to fall into, I'm a developer and I develop things. And when I'm not developing, I'm sitting at my computer developing stuff. And it's kind of important to have some time outside of that, to not just for your own sort of mental health, but for your physical health, changing that context. Even if here come the bunny quotes, right? All you're doing is going from sitting in front of the computer to sitting on the couch and reading, right? There is still a difference in that, right? We'll be sitting on a different couch in a different room, maybe with people around, I don't know. And just the physical act of doing something different is so important, I think, to our sort of physical and mental well-being. So, yeah, personally, I'm noodle around on instruments and play bass guitar, and I'll occasionally go for a walk and stuff like that. It's kind of boring stuff about me, but it's kind of important, I think, to have that disconnect. But
Absolutely. You spoke my words. It's so important. Being a developer, it's brilliant. We do cool things, amazing things, but in front of a computer for long hours, it's not very healthy. So, yeah, something to have that disconnect, as you say, is always good.
Absolutely. So let's set the scene a little bit. We've talked about we haven't, but on the show we've talked about Umbraco a few times, and we've talked about Blazor a few times. And you mentioned about Umbraco is a technology that you come back to a lot. Partially, I feel because the community is just so friendly. Like their catchphrase, I suppose, their marketing term is it's the friendly CMS, and I feel like the team and the community around it is so friendly too. So, but before we do that, could you tell us a little bit about what Umbraco is, just so that we can set the expectations of the listener, so they've got a little bit of background knowledge. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. So Umbraco, it's a content management system. It used to be a .NET framework-based content management system until quite recently. I think last year, August end, if I'm not wrong, Umbraco came out with a .NET 5-based Umbraco 9. So that is Umbraco CMS for you. Umbraco CMS is open source, and as you just said, it's a friendly CMS with a very friendly community. And of course, it's a fantastic CMS to learn and to use as well. So that's about Umbraco that I have to talk about. Umbraco Hardcore specifically. So shall I talk about Umbraco Hardcore as well now?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yep.
So Umbraco Hardcore is a product based of Umbraco CMS. So it's available in the Umbraco Cloud platform. It's a cloud-based SaaS offering. And unlike the traditional CMS, it's a headless CMS. When I say headless, I always have this picture of the headless horseman in my head for some strange reason. But that is what exactly it is. When you think of a CMS, a traditional CMS, it's got the head that is the web front end or the templating engine. Headless means take that templating engine away. All your content gets delivered to you as an API. It can be a REST API, and more popularly, GraphQL APIs. They are really popular amongst the headless CMS universe as well. So Umbraco Hardcore is a headless CMS. If you know Umbraco, you can take all that knowledge into Umbraco Hardcore, and Umbraco Hardcore provides you with an API, both REST as well as a GraphQL version, which you can use in your projects.
Excellent. I do like being able to swap out that sort of front-end technology for something that I'm a little more experienced with. There's absolutely no... So to set expectations, the last version of Umbraco that I used, I believe, was Umbraco 8, and it had when you go into the sort of the back office, the admin side of things, it was an Angular JS app, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's perfectly fine. It works perfectly well. But if I'm less experienced with Angular or React or whatever, I'd like an API to talk to say, okay, here's a JSON blob perhaps that represents the content I want you to store. Here's the name, here's some properties, store it. Okay, now I've written my own front end. Talk to that API and display that to me, right? I feel like that fits more within the sort of web API. I'm worried about saying it microservices or maybe a backend for front end sort of idea of I'll just talk to this API and display this content, right? That feels like it's a little better. It feels more Jamstack like as well. So I can maybe have a static website that has an API in JavaScript or something, some JavaScript that loads in the page and says, okay, load this content, now load this content. And I like that website can then be served by Netlify, DigitalOcean, anyone, and it costs me next to nothing, right?
Exactly. So you covered most of the important terms there. First of all, Jamstack. When you think about a headless CMS, Jamstack is the word out there. So you have JavaScript, an API, and the content management behind the scenes. So if you are used to using Umbraco CMS as an editor, that's the exact same thing that you would get with Umbraco Headless, that is Umbraco Hardcore. So as an editor, you're covered. Now, when you talk about developers and development teams, you want a wide variety of skill set. So that's again something which you can benefit from. So when you think about headless CMS, is one of the most compelling topics that I found out there is that when you learn a CMS, be it any CMS, you have to actually learn that technology. Say, for example, if I'm picking up Umbraco CMS, Umbraco 8 or Umbraco 9 now, you are expected to know .NET because the front-end rendering is fully .NET based. And of course, to build anything for the back office, it's AngularJS based. But think about an API. I'm getting the content as an API, a REST API or a GraphQL API. As long as whatever technology I'm using can connect to that API over an HTTP request, I'm sorted. So I can be a .NET developer, I can be a Vue.js developer, I can be a React developer, an Angular developer, any of the skill set or the frameworks or the libraries that I know, I can still use Umbraco CMS. So all I'm doing is talking to an API. So that it's not just about having a headless CMS or content as an API. You are also looking at a team, a development team with a wide variety of skill sets, which helps you attract more talent as well, I think.
Absolutely. And I feel like you can abstract that away, right? If you're using Umbraco Hardcore, you're sitting behind an API. You don't have to worry about, it's the same with like if we use Entity Framework, right? You don't have to learn SQL. You don't have to know that there is a database. You just know if you talk to this object, this class, this thing, you get the data back. You don't have to worry about the sort of how. Right? It's all sort of abstracted away. You don't have to worry about it. And I really like that because I've talked about this a lot so far this year in 2022. It lowers that barrier to entry, doesn't it? Right? I don't need to know anything about Umbraco. If I'm using Umbraco Hardcore, I just need to know where the API endpoints are, or I need to know about which class to load and to talk to, and it just gets me my content, right?
Exactly. It's content as an API, and I talk to it using an HTTP request, be it the REST API or the GraphQL API. So we've covered Jamstack as well as the development team. Another most important thing when I talk about or when I think about headless CMSs and particularly Umbraco Hardcore is that it gives you an omni-channel experience. In fact, my friend Manuel Cicera, who is from Australia, he's written blog posts about this. So with omni-channel experience, what you are targeting is a single experience for your customers across multiple marketing channels. So think about this Umbraco Hardcore instance, which has all your content. The same content can power a website. It can power an e-commerce platform. It can power a mobile app. It can power something on the IoT range of devices. So it's the same content for your customers across multiple channels, which is, again, fantastic, I feel. So there is a huge value as far as the businesses are concerned as well.
And that makes sense, right? You're not repeating yourself. You're not having to, because if you have two sources of your content, let's say your website content and your mobile app content, when it changes in one place, you got to go remember to change it somewhere else, right? And it could be something as simple as maybe the placement or the color of a button if you're talking programmatic. But if you're talking maybe as a company, I published something which needs to be redacted for whatever reason, and I remember to do it on the website content base, but I forget to do it for the mobile app or for the marketing platform or for the shop storefront platform, I can run into real problems there where maybe I've produced something that needs to be removed, but I've forgotten. I've gone, I've got to do it across 15 different platforms, 15 different databases. All of these apps need to change. Everything's got to be reshipped. Hopefully you don't have to reship things when your content changes, but let's just say that it does. That's then all of this nightmare of, oh my goodness, we've said something we shouldn't have done. I have to change it in a million places.
Absolutely. Again, you spoke my words there. This is one of the many things about hardcore and headless CMS. You change it in one place, all the channels which are then fed off by a single Umbraco Hardcore instance gets updated instantly. You don't need to worry about updating in a million places. So it's a single omni-channel, comprehensive and consistent experience, which is important to build brands as well as, for your business as well.
Okay. So if it is indeed headless, it doesn't have a user interface, and I'm a member of the marketing team or the copywriting team, how do I get my content there? Do I need to go speak to a developer? Do I need to go, hey, can you post this for me? I don't know what I'm doing. Or is there something? Is it like headless in that there is a user interface, but it's more the back office, like the admin side of stuff? Or is it headless as in there's nothing? You got to go write your own user interface and hope for the best. How does that work then?
Headless means there is no preview or there is no front-end rendering engine. You decide how to render your website. So your content lives somewhere and your website lives somewhere. They don't talk to each other apart from the API that the app is pulling the content in from. And as far as a marketing person or a content editor is concerned, they get a back office experience. So if you're used to an Umbraco 8 or a normal Umbraco CMS back office, that's the exact back office that you would get with Umbraco Hardcore as well. So it's the same back office that an editor would see. So they'll fill out all the fields, they'll populate all the content, and hey, that content magically appears in an API for you. So that's what happens with Umbraco Hardcore.
Right, I see. So it's not. So there is something for the non-technical people to interact with on an admin side. That's good, because if I'm honest, I was a little worried about, oh my goodness, if I ship this to some customers, how are they going to add content? But no, that makes sense.
Oh yeah, there is a back office. There's the same friendly CMS back office that you would get with Umbraco Hardcore.
Excellent. Okay, so what can I do with Umbraco Hardcore? Before we start talking about some of the cool stuff that you've done and how you've hooked into it with Blazor and things like that, what can I do? I know that I can run my website. I know that I can run perhaps a storefront. But is it, and here come the bunny quotes again, is it just that? Can I do other stuff? I mean, I have loads of content. Where am I going to show it? What am I going to do with it?
Okay, so my answer is, what cannot you do with Umbraco Hardcore? Because it's very flexible. It's an API full of content. So had it been a talk, I would have showed you a nice slide, because I do have a slide which I use for my talks. So it is quite powerful. You have content in the cloud and you can power websites. Websites can be developed in any platform that you want to. You define or you specify, you decide what tech stack you want to use, and you can use that. You can develop e-commerce platforms, add your own logic, take payments, all of that. You can have cool mobile apps. You can have IoT devices talking to your API. You can have augmented reality. You can have watches talking to it. So think of anything that can communicate with an API, because we're all surrounded by gadgets these days. All of that can derive content from Umbraco Hardcore. So think of a point of sale kiosk that can talk to Hardcore as well. So the opportunities are countless. You just need to have that creative edge of, hey, I can use Umbraco Hardcore. I just need the content as an API for this. That's all what you need to think. So it's a slightly different shift as well on how you envisage your websites and your content as well. It is definitely creative. Once you start using it, I think you'll then get to have a million ideas of, hey, I can use it for this, I can use it for that. So the opportunities are infinite, countless possibilities.
Okay, excellent. All right. So I guess let's say I'm trying to decide between having traditionally an on-premise Umbraco installation that's running on my server. It's doing everything I need it to do. It's running lovely. It's serving my website, whatever. And then the boss comes to me and goes, Jamie, I've had this great idea. I've heard this thing called Umbraco Hardcore. I'm going to hit you with the same enthusiasm I had for Bitcoin. We should totally use it because I've heard of it, right? And then I had to start doing some investigations. In your opinion, again, buddy quotes, right? Why? I always like to start with why. Why do I want to use Heartcore instead of my own on-premises Umbraco installation? What's the big sell there? Is there a big sell? I mean, it may be that I don't need to use it.
Yeah, of course. There is a big advantage of using Heartcore over a normal CMS install. You will have to handcraft all the code that you need to emit out that API, which draws in all your content and gives you out as a API in itself. That's the first thing. I don't think there is anything official as such from the HQ that supports it. I know there are community members who have written packages around it, but Umbraco has grown and it takes a lot of effort to keep up to that pace and continuously improve and update your packages as well. So that's one reason. This project is supported completely by HQ. So there's a solid team behind it working at maintaining the platform as well as improving the platform, giving us more and more goodies. So that's one of the things. Secondly, as I said, you'll have to handcraft your own code, be it for the REST API or for GraphQL API. It's not that easy as far as I can see to do all that amount of work and keep up with the pace of changing platform as well. Finally, this is a completely self-hosted SaaS cloud offering, so I don't need to worry about hosting it as well. So yeah, why not go for Heartcore when you have a platform which can give you all the flexibility that you need? But again, you need to choose wisely for yourself. It's not for everyone to go the CMS way. It's not for everyone to go the Heartcore way as well. I think if you have a course where you have a multiple say channels for communicating to your customers, like websites, mobile apps, IoT devices, that is a perfect use case for Heartcore. But having said that, there are customers who just have websites which they want to develop in their own tech stack, and they opt for Umbraco Hardcore. So it's up to your own choice as well, I would say. But yes, nothing stopping me from using Umbraco Hardcore.
Right. Okay. I like that. It gives me like lots of opinions and lots of chances to sort of think, where is this project going? Are we going to have point of sale kiosks that need to show the same content? Do we have maybe mobile apps, all that kind of stuff? It gives me a chance to sort of think a little bit in the future. I don't usually like to think what's happening in a year with this project, because by the time we get to a year, even if I'm still working on it, I'm a different person, right? And the project has completely different goals and things in mind, and so it could be that by the time we get to a year, we're rewriting it anyway. But I like that. I like that I have that ability, and I also like that it's a cloud-based thing as well, because presumably then, first of all, they're managing it, right? I don't have to worry about system updates. I don't have to worry so much about like the physical security of the box. I don't need to worry about platform instability because they're taking care of it. You get all the benefits, I suppose, of cloud computing versus, on-premises one server, right? So I like that. So what about? So you talked about how it's an API, and I can talk to it from whatever I want. I want to write something in Go, I can do it in Go. If I want to write something in server-side Node, write it in server-side Node. If I want to write it with .NET, I can do that. Now, I know that there's this wonderful thing called Blazor that's happening. Now, if you want to explain Blazor, you can. It's up to you. I mean, I could happily say it's just .NET in the browser, right? That's super simple, right? Now, I know that you've had the chance to sort of play around with Heartcore a lot, and play around with Blazor, and play with them both. Is it quite literally just a case of I pull in a NuGet package and I'm done? Or is there loads and loads of wiring up and loads of stuff to do that really sort of holds me back and stops? What's the barrier to entry, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Okay, so Blazor, as you said, .NET on the browser. I don't think there's a better way to explain that either. And I don't think there's any technology which has taken the community with so much excitement in the recent years. Blazor is really hot at the moment. And yes, with Heartcore and Blazor, it depends upon which flavor of the API that you're using. So there is a NuGet client, Heartcore client for Umbraco. I have used that for my REST APIs. But with Blazor, I have been primarily using the GraphQL endpoint from Heartcore. So I wanted to learn GraphQL, which is the reason why I signed up for a talk. And I did a talk on GraphQL, Blazor, and Heartcore, which was fun to learn and fun to do as well. So with Blazor and Umbraco Hardcore, there is you can't really use the Hardcore client, which the HQ has developed as a NuGet client, because GraphQL is a completely different thing in itself. So for connecting to the Umbraco Hardcore from Blazor, you can use any of the .NET GraphQL clients that are available out there. You can actually use HTTP client as well. There is nothing wrong. But when you have a GraphQL endpoint, you might want to use a proper .NET GraphQL client. So I started using the GraphQL for .NET, that particular client, in my initial talks. You have to write your own deserialized classes. I'm talking tech now. I'm sorry about that. Nothing wrong with that. My initial demos absolutely worked using GraphQL for .NET. So that was fun. And then I came across this client called Strawberry Shake as well, which is from the house of Chili Cream. So they have another implementation of GraphQL in .NET. So for listeners, GraphQL is actually a specification. There are implementations of it in various different programming languages. GraphQL for .NET is one of the .NET implementation. And Hot Chocolate is another GraphQL server. It's from the house of Chili Cream. They have a client called Strawberry Shake as well. So that particular client is a much more sophisticated client. It can talk to my endpoint, download the schema, and give me a strongly typed C# client for my Hardcore endpoint. And from there on, I can execute an operation service in my code, which talks to my Hardcore endpoint, gets me all the data, deserializes it for me, and says, hey, here is the data you want to play around with. So that's what happens in a nutshell. But I know that Strawberry Shake and GraphQL client are a lot more than what I see. I'm not like a GraphQL expert. I know enough GraphQL to query an endpoint and display the results. But it is totally fun to play with. It's a programming, it's a query language in itself. So if you are familiar with CQL, it's a query language in itself. You write queries to talk to your endpoint, and it gives you back only the thing that you asked for. So imagine I have this big page in Heartcore with, say, 1 million pages in that piece of content. I can say, hey, for this piece of content, just get me this field, and this field, and nothing more. And the API would bring back to you just those 3 fields. So this API is made for mobile. So that's the entire reason GraphQL came into existence. It's made for mobile. So imagine a mobile app consuming Heartcore. I want only these fields. So it's communicating, getting the data back quickly. Most importantly, only what I asked for. Is not giving me all those 1 million fields, which means that I'm taking advantage of the GraphQL endpoint and reducing my bandwidth, and just getting back what exactly I need. So it's very powerful. And I'm just going to kind of go go slightly over the tangent here to say, now that we have Maui on the radar as well, and it has a Blazor aspect to it, I am really, really interested in what comes out of this. So I've had a chance to play around with Blazor, the Blazor part of Maui with a plain simple API from Umbraco. It was all good. I've played around with the REST aspect of it. Now I want to see what comes out of the GraphQL aspect of it, because what we could have could be extremely powerful, I feel. I can have a Blazor web app. I can use the same code in my mobile devices, that is, my apps for iOS and an Android. I can use the same Blazor code on my desktop app. So it covers the entire spectrum of devices for me. I know that Maui is going to be supported on Tizen and Linux as well. So I've got coverage on those devices as well. And bringing GraphQL to the mix, we have a super powerful app powered by a super API.
It is amazing, just like all of the different platforms that are being supported by .NET and all of the sort of components of .NET, right? With Maui, because my understanding is that Xamarin Forms and Blazor and things like sort of in effect being combined into Maui. I mean, my understanding may be incorrect. I appreciate that I've probably got that wrong, but please, listener, go check that out. One of the things that I'd like to just sort of double back to, just so that people understand a little bit more, is that GraphQL really is that powerful. So, like when you said you're only pulling back the data that you want, it really is that. For some people might think, well, I'll just build an API endpoint that just gives me the ID, but you don't have to do that. You could just say, just give me the ID. I saw this wonderful example of someone had listed all of the characters, all of the planets, all of the allegiances in the Star Wars universe in their GraphQL database, and they said, get me just the names of the people. And it was the same endpoint as, get me just the names of the planets. And which was the same endpoint as, get me all the data. And the difference in the size of the data that came back is ridiculous, because obviously if you think about names linked to planets, linked to political allegiances, linked to storylines, linked to films, all of that stuff, that's going to be huge, and that's likely going to be several big JSON blobs. Whereas if you only want the names of the characters, that's going to be tiny in comparison, right? Or if you say, just give me the names of the characters who live on this planet, it's even smaller. So like you say, you're being really specific. Just give me this data, and it only gives you that. And so your requests are tiny, which is brilliant. Like you say, it's perfect for mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. So GraphQL, it's a single smart endpoint. That's the term that they give to the endpoint, single smart endpoint, which takes in queries, and those queries are specified by the developers of the consuming app. And the GraphQL server has a way of understanding these queries, parsing it, and what it does is it gives it the shape that you ask for. So you might be asking for the name of a person, the friends of a person, and say a description about the person from the Star Wars movie series. And what the endpoint would give back is name, friends, and the description. That is it. GraphQL doesn't kind of concern itself about where the data is stored. It gives you the shape that you asked for. So your queries can be quite flexible according to your needs, and GraphQL gives you back the data that you asked for in the shape that you asked for, which means the consuming developer is always in control of what they want to ask. Usually, otherwise, with a REST API, the consuming developer would come to me. I'm a backend developer. Say, Poornima, what we need to add this field into the API. We need to get the response back. What should be my request be? What should the request be like? What should be the response be like? There's a whole lot of communication. And if I'm not very careful, it only takes me a second to break that API and break the app as well. But with GraphQL, if I'm not consuming a field, it's as good as the field doesn't exist for me. So it's business as usual. So one of the biggest boons of GraphQL is that the consuming app and the server can develop and iterate at their own pace, which is fantastic when you think about something like Umbraco Hardcore, which is very flexible. And then you have all these sort of apps, websites, mobile apps, IoT devices all lining up for you. And all that development can carry on at their own pace without the need for the backend developer to constantly do anything about the API. So yes, GraphQL is extremely powerful. And it is made for mobile. Nothing wrong with running it on a website either. But when you think about GraphQL, it's like made for mobile API.
I like it. I like what you say there about how the developer doesn't then have to spend time worrying about the contract between themselves and the consumers. As a back-end developer, you can focus on the bit that actually makes the difference, which is like how it does it. It's almost like, in C# we have interfaces, right? You design that interface so that anyone can use it. They don't have to worry about how it works. You can worry about how it works. You can worry about what's going on behind the scenes, where the data's stored, how it's stored, any relationships, things like that. But the consumer doesn't need to know that when I ask for order number 7, if I also want the address, I don't have to then put in another request to an address endpoint with the order ID. I can just say, give me the order and the address it's being sent to. Maybe I need the name as well. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I need the information to do an invoice. So maybe I need an icon or an image or something, and, line items and stuff like that sorted. I don't have to go order and name and address and image and, total tax or whatever, right? I could just get the information I need and say, brilliant, this is me sorted. I can focus on what I'm doing because now I'm the front-end engineer. I can focus on what I'm doing with that data. Don't have to worry about discarding anything because I've literally only asked for what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another benefit. With a REST API, you would have to query multiple times for related information. With GraphQL, that's not the case. GraphQL endpoint, that specification is smart enough to understand the dependencies and the hierarchy of your data and then give you back that information. Again, I use a slide to iterate this point in my talk, so I would have shown it. So I developed an endpoint with a very simple course and student data based off the EF Core tutorial on MS Docs, and then made that into GraphQL API. So you can query a course and the enrollments of students for that particular course all in one go. So with Umbraco LM, again, one of the most common things that we do is if we have a parent page, have a page which shows the content of the parent page, and on the same page show the content of the children page as well. So I can do all that on the single page with a single query in Umbraco as well. But with GraphQL endpoint, again, that effort and the way you see it has been kind of simplified for you. Once you pick up the query language, then you can actually work your way around with GraphQL and then query everything in one go. I can say, hey, for this particular parent page, get me these fields from the parent page. But then for the child pages, I want only these fields for the child pages, nothing more. Whereas with a proper Umbraco install, what it would give me is the Umbraco page as well as the child pages and all the information about it. But I don't need all of it. I only need a part of it. So there could be ways to mitigate that, but the entire process becomes a lot more simpler with GraphQL is what I feel.
I like it. I'm all about simplifying the work that needs to be done. I'm all about making it simpler for the user, simpler for the consumer, sorry. So if I'm a developer and I'm consuming an API, give me the simplest possible. I don't want anything complex because all I want to do is get the job done, right? And if all I need to do is say, give me the parent page, I don't want the child pages, I maybe want some metadata about it, and I just get that, I'm happy. So I like that idea that I can use Umbraco Hardcore to get my content and the metadata, or just the content, or maybe just the name of the content, or perhaps who created the content, or when it was created, when it was last updated, all that kind of stuff. I like that. So then, does this mean then that because you said earlier on, it is entirely possible with loads of effort to make an Umbraco installation behave similar to Umbraco Hardcore? There's loads of effort required, but why would you if these two products already exist? Does this mean then, and this, I'm not asking to reveal the magic that you'll have access to because you're an MVP, but does this mean then that Umbraco Hardcore and Umbraco are evolving separately, or are they evolving sort of at the same time and they're just swapping the interface into it? Do you know that? You may not know that.
Okay, what I can say from the knowledge that I have is I don't have the infrastructure knowledge of Heartcore on its own. I know that's a cloud offering, but what Umbraco Hardcore offers you is the back office of Umbraco. So it's based off Umbraco CMS. But then there's an entire different architecture and entire different team and development effort around Heartcore in itself to provide that API, which is a complete RESTful API and a GraphQL endpoint as well. So there is separate infrastructure for it, if I am not wrong. Plus, I get to know that there is more work coming on the Umbraco Hardcore front, like there is going to be Open API support for the REST API from Umbraco Hardcore. Umbraco Hardcore is moving to .NET 6, that is Umbraco 10, in the near future, sometime this year when Umbraco 10 comes out with .NET .NET 6 support. So that's another thing, and they are introducing more editors into Umbraco Hardcore. Like I, as a developer, can create pure HTML, JavaScript, and CSS-based web components, which will run inside Umbraco Hardcore, and then get into my API, both GraphQL and REST, if I'm not wrong. So there is development happening on Umbraco Hardcore front. And I also hear about a fantastic community contribution that is getting into Umbraco Hardcore, using which you can actually pull in external data, XML or JSON, into Umbraco Hardcore, and then that can be a part of your content API from Umbraco Hardcore as well. That sounds really interesting as well. Not to mention, not to fail to mention the wonderful effort that goes beyond behind all this, I feel.
I like that, because then, like, imagine you have your business domain is you have some content, but there is some publicly available content you want to include, right? So, for instance, in the UK, for international listeners in the UK government exposes a bunch of public APIs that give you data on things like the public holidays, right? There is a public holiday API. You could poke at it and it will give you a JSON blob with all of the public holidays for the rest of that year. So let's say you're running a shop, right? And you've got all of your products in Umbraco Hardcore, but you also want to display the days when the shop is physically closed because it's maybe a bank holiday or some kind of public holiday. We've got the Queen's Jubilee coming up this year, so there's an extra couple of days. So you don't have to then go into your content and say, or even go to the page if you're hard coding it and say, we're not open this day, this day, and this day. You could literally say, if this is indeed coming along, you could say, go to the public API for the bank holidays and add that to my bank holiday table, perhaps, or my bank holiday list of content. And then you've already got it. You've got it perhaps at build time, or maybe you can do it to happen every 2 weeks or so in case there's an update. But you have that data. You then don't have to spend time as a content creator, or perhaps it gets booted to development. Take this data and add it to our content. You don't have to do that because it's automatically there, right? I really like that idea.
Yeah. So when I heard about this idea, it was fantastic. But now that I'm talking to you about it, it is again so powerful. So you have two different content sources merged into one for you and then coming out to you in a single API. So it's fantastic as far as the consuming developers are concerned as well, as far as the content marketeers are concerned as well. And as far as the consumer is concerned, they get the exact same experience. So it's a win-win.
I like it. So, do you know of any other new things that are coming up in Umbraco Hardcore that's quite exciting? Because obviously there's development happening all the time.
So yeah, I spoke to you about the Open API and the Umbraco 10 being the new kind of hardcore back office based on .NET 6. I hear that there's custom grid editors coming up, and then that will make way for custom property editors as well. So custom grid editors means Umbraco Grid is one of the content editing interface, may I say, for the sake of simplicity, but the technical term is property editor. It's a way for content editors to build rich content for their websites. And with Umbraco Grid, you can have your own little targeted kind of property editors, which you can build. Say you want to talk to an external API on your own and bring that data in, you can do that using a property editor. So web component-based property editors are going to be a thing in Hardcore, and then that is going to pave way for more complex property editors. So I've read that about that somewhere in the roadmap, I guess. Then there is going to be the Umbraco ID and two-factor authentication for the back office of Umbraco Hardcore, which I believe it's been something that some of the big customers have been asking the HQ about, I guess. So that's going to come in. But I think on the overall scheme of things, that team is growing. There's active development, and the product is continuing to grow and improve. So yes, these are all the things that I know of. Yeah, I think these are all what I have at the moment about Hardcore. But yes, I am equally intrigued to see how it all goes, how it's all going to kind of pan out and look like going ahead.
So what's really cool to hear is that the next version of Umbraco will be .NET 6, because at the date that we're recording, we're, February, 11th, right? So we're a couple of weeks out from when it goes out. Microsoft have just made it very clear over on socials that, hey, .NET 5 is being end-of-lifed in 2-3 months' time. So I really like that the Umbraco team, the Umbraco Hardcore team, are at a point where they can actually keep up with that cadence. Like .NET 6 is going to be vNext for Umbraco, because Umbraco for the longest time was .NET Framework, like with a capital F, right? And the modern .NET 5, 6, 7, I can keep counting, but you know what I mean. The new versions of .NET are going to have like a 2-year support cycle, I believe. And so the fact that they can keep up with that pace is just amazing. That the majority of Umbraco's lifetime has been with .NET Framework, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's been very stable, very, very useful. It definitely will run on your Windows servers, but now we're at a point where they can, if they want, just turn that wheel and just release as quickly as they want, right? And that is amazing to me to think that because like I say, the last time I used Umbraco was Umbraco 8, and that would have been, I guess, 2017. So we've come very quickly up the version numbers. And I think that's great, that just the ability to iterate really quickly because of perhaps the underlying framework and being able to add, because I feel like GraphQL isn't something that you can easily add to .NET Framework, right? I'm not saying it's impossible, but the fact that they can add this, that they can say, hey, because we're on .NET 5, you can have this extra cool thing, right? And I really like that, I've got to say.
Absolutely. So talking about the release cadence, when the blog post came about, I think last year, about how Umbraco HQ is planning the releases going ahead, I was like, yeah, this is more in line with Microsoft release cadences, which is fantastic, because then Umbraco as a product continues to grow and continues to benefit from the underlying .NET and the APIs. Furthermore, we all know that .NET 6 is the unified, like covering all range of platform APIs. And I think that will be really complete once Maui comes out as well. So again, Umbraco can benefit from all of that. If you compare Umbraco 8 and Umbraco 9, Umbraco 9 is like blazingly fast. So that's the first fleeting thing that hits you the minute you start an Umbraco 9 instance. Plus, the more and more I look at it, the more and more I kind of go and have a look at the source code, because it's all available on GitHub if you want to have a look and contribute. I get a feeling that it's really well architected, and it is a CMS which actually embraces .NET very well. So which means that all that goodness is going to come to Umbraco Hardcore as well going ahead. So I'm looking forward to the growth of the product as well, because there's a real opportunity taking advantages of all the goodness that .NET gives you, and then build a solid foundation on top of that and build the product that you need.
Yep, I have to agree. And not just that, you get all of the innovations that other people are putting in, right? So let's say that it's not this, but let's say that Umbraco was like an island of people just working away, that they're sort of insulated against the rest of the world. Well, when .NET changes, they wouldn't be able to get those changes. But now that when .NET evolves, the Umbraco developers and consumers and everything get those changes too, right? And that's what's wonderful about that. I talked to someone not so long back about a video game emulator, right? So this is an app that you can use that's in .NET that allows you to make your computer pretend that it's a Nintendo Switch. And he was saying, we fed back to Microsoft, can we have this attribute that does some stuff? We've noticed, because we're essentially stress testing your system, we've noticed in these particular situations, things get a bit wobbly, performance goes through the floor. If we give you the logs, you can investigate it. And Microsoft went, great. And then silently, those optimizations were included in the next version of .NET, which came out only a few months later. So like everybody's getting all of this innovation coming from everywhere. And like you say, right, can you imagine, let's say you're 6 months into using .NET, not .NET. Let's say we go back in time and we're at the six month point. You've just started using Umbraco. You're falling in love with it. It's great. And then somebody says, oh yeah, but in the future, you'll be able to use it with your phone and on a fridge and on an IoT device. And you can go into the shop and they'll have it on the, the small display. And you'd be like, what are you talking about? Go continue to drink whatever it is you're drinking. I'm happy doing this work here, right? Just the speed at which we've sort of evolved, I guess, it's mind-blowing to me. But also the effort behind the scenes that's going on is also as equally staggering and mind-blowing to me. It's not just all happening for free. All of these engineers, the Umbraco engineers, the Umbraco open source contributors, the .NET people, the Microsoft people, everyone else, everyone that's made Blazor happen, it's just the amount of engineering time that's gone into all of this is amazing to me. I just wanted to share that I'm overwhelmed, I think.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of engineering marvel, which is, I think, a good term to talk about. Yes, definitely some really clever people and lots of love and effort for the code.
Absolutely.
I think I am one of the consumers of all that engineering marvel as well. So happy and proud to be a part of all that's happening, I guess.
Absolutely. So then, okay, where if I've listened to this and I've decided I want to learn more about Umbraco Hardcore, I want to learn more about some of Poornima's experiments with it and things like that, where can I go to learn about a few of those things? Is it umbracohardcore.com? Is it, what do I do? Where do I go?
You can go to umbraco.com and there is a products section in which you can learn about Umbraco Hardcore. There's a dedicated area on the website for Umbraco Hardcore. Furthermore, if you go to umbraco.com blog, there are targeted blogs at Umbraco Hardcore and the product roadmaps around it. That's one area where you can learn. There are some fun articles about hardcore as well in that, which the community members like Emmanuel Tissera, who's my friend, myself, we all have written blog posts about Umbraco Hardcore, so you can read about the fantastic use cases. So Emmanuel wrote about his fictitious Lamington cake shops, which was not only a fun article, but a delicious article as well, talking about cakes. I wrote about an IoT device talking to Umbraco Hardcore using the REST API. And Harry Potter was the theme because I love Harry Potter. Then more recently, I've been giving a lot of talks about Blazor and GraphQL using Umbraco Hardcore. So you would find that on YouTube as well. So a lot of information out there.
I like it. So what about if people are like, hey, Poornima, I have a question. Can people reach out to you? Is there a way to do that? How do people keep in touch with like what you're working on and things like that?
You can reach out to me on Twitter. So if I know the answer, I'll definitely make it a point to answer and reply, or at least direct people in the direction that they need to want to get the answer as well. So that can be a good way. I'm not a very active I tweet like too many times a day, but I'm active on Twitter. I keep a watch on what's happening because the entire dev community lives on Twitter, I feel. So yeah, Twitter is a good place to reach out to me.
Okay, excellent. What I'll do is I'll put a whole bunch of links in the show notes so people don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, I got to write it all down. Just press through on your device that you're listening to and you can see all of that. And yeah, they'll all be there. I'll make sure to link to the Umbraco Hardcore website. I'll link to, because I know that there is a Blazor NuGet package, but you said you didn't use that so much. And I'll put a whole bunch of links. Oh, excellent. Okay, so listener, but Poornima has actually shared a whole bunch of links with me just now whilst I was saying all of that. So I don't even have to go looking for them because Poornima's ace. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoyed talking tech and all the things I love talking about as well.
Thank you, Poornima, for taking some time today to talk to me. I am very excited to go away and learn about Umbraco Hardcore now. Maybe to pick up my project of my Blazor project that I was running. Maybe see if I can do something else. I like it. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much and enjoy listening.
That was my interview with Poornima Nayar. Be sure to check out the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at .netcore.show, and there will be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/subscribe for ways to do that, or to reach out via our contact page. That's .netcore.show/contact. And to come back again next time for more .NET goodness. I'll see you again real soon. See you later, folks. The .NET Core podcast is a production of RJJ Software Limited.